Hi, my name's Cash and you're watching CashedOutCars. In today's video we're going to be showing you how to add interior lights in your vehicle. Now this is a 1993 Miata and this video is great for older cars that only came with one or very few interior lights, and by adding them you'll be able to, one, see better at night and also modernize the car a little bit. The only thing that this process requires is at least one interior light already wired in. So with that said, let's get started. Now, the first thing that you need to determine is what circuit you want to tap your new LED lights into. On my car, which is a Miata, it only has two courtesy lights, one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side here. And those are the two options, and that's what we're going to be tapping into. Now, on most older cars, you're not going to have too many options to choose from, and you'll probably have to work with something like this in this Miata. Whenever you're working with anything electrical, it's a good idea to disconnect the negative terminal of your battery. That'll make sure no power is running to the car and you don't accidentally shock yourself. Once that's all set, you could go ahead and pop out the light that you want to remove. On these Miatas, it just requires a little bit of prying from either sides, and I'm just going to use a screwdriver here to help with the extraction of this light. There we go, very simple. And then this will just pull out of place here. And there's the light fixture. I went ahead and dropped my glove box so I could have access to these wires a little bit better in there. To do that on a Miata, there are just two screws that go up from the bottom that hold in two hinges that hold that thing in place. Just take those out and you could remove your glove box. Obviously on different cars, it's going to be a different process. A nice thing about Miatas is these courtesy lights could pop right off if you disconnect this harness. Obviously that won't be the same on all cars. But once you have your light located and you have room to get to it, you need to figure out which wires you want to splice into. Now on a Miata, the red light is the power wire, the white light is a ground for when your door is open, and the black light is a normal ground. So since I only want my light to come on when the door opens, I'm going to splice into this red wire and this white wire and wire light into that circuit. This means that if a door is open, that light will be on. Also keep in mind that since there's a switch on this light, that light will only come on when the door is actually open, and that this switch will still control this interior light. Now you need to decide how you want to splice into those different wires. I'm just using some of these T-connectors that clamp right over the wire and allow you to tee off of it. To use one of these things, it's very simple. You just find the wire that you want to splice into, put it in the connector like this, and go ahead and close this thing down. You're probably going to want to use some pliers to make sure this actually closes, and it's going to be hard to do by hand. There we go, that thing is teed off there. Now we could go ahead and use the spade connector, and that just presses into place. And what we'll be able to do with this is feed a wire out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the other wire that I want to splice into, which is that white wire. Like I said, the way I'm wiring mine up is so the light is only on if the door is open. You could find a wiring diagram for what you're tapping into, and you'll be able to do a combination of different things depending on what your needs may be. There's that, and now we could go ahead and move on to the next step of this wiring process. Next, you could go ahead and cut a piece of wire. I only needed a piece that was about this long for my project. This is 20 gauge wire, and depending on what you're using, you probably won't need a super thick wire, especially if you're running LEDs like what I'm going to be showing you. So these will definitely cut it. What we need to do is strip the ends of these wires so we could get them into these connectors over here, and then we're going to be soldering our LEDs to the other end. Could go ahead and twist the ends of the wire, and then you could go ahead and put them into the spade connector as far as they could go, and then you're going to need to crimp this wire down. And then once you've got that thing on there, go ahead and give it a little bit of a tug. Make sure it's a secure connection, and then once you're happy with it, the connection's good to go, and you could go ahead and do the other one. So here's the finished product that we just finished up. You could go ahead and put that onto the T-connectors that are coming off of your wiring harness in your car or on the thing that you separated if you're working on something like my car. And that's how the final setup is going to go. So now what we have to do is get some LEDs attached to this wire. This is obviously what's going to power the LEDs. So we could go ahead and wire those onto here and then we'll be in good shape. Now we could go ahead and get ready to solder on our LEDs. To do this, you want to get some solder in the wire itself. So just go ahead, heat up the wire, make sure it's nice and hot, and then feed solder into it. That one's nice and good to go. The LEDs that I am using here are straight from Amazon. I have these linked in the description. They're a 5mm LED, and I think it was $7 for 54 or 56, and it came with a bunch of different colors. So if you're looking to do a bunch of projects for a really low price, this is a pretty good way to go, and these are fairly bright for what I wanted them to do. Now, LEDs are polarized, which means there's a positive and a negative that has to be hooked up correctly in order for the light to work. On these LEDs, the brown wire is the anode and the black wire is the cathode, which means that the brown wire has to be hooked up to the positive and the black is the negative. If you want to use heat shrink, you want to put that over the wire before you go ahead and solder your connections on, and then afterwards we'll actually shrink that down over the wire. So now we're ready to go ahead and solder it. And there we go, that's a good connection. And so is that. And that there was just using some heat to shrink down the heat shrink. This is a great way to insulate these wires and make sure that they're not going to bump into each other and short out. Another way of doing that is electrical tape, which basically does the same job, it just doesn't come out quite as clean. Now I went ahead and plugged that connector back in to test my work, and as you could see, both of those LEDs are on when the door is open, and as I shut the door, they go off. So that's perfect. That means these are wired up just as I wanted them to be, and now I could go ahead and mount them. My car conveniently had a fairly structural metal rail here that the glove box connected to, and I just ran the wires inside of that and threw some holes in it and put the LEDs facing down at the floor like this. Now this will take a little bit of adjusting, but for now they're just held on with zip ties, and I'm going to use a combination of zip ties and a little bit of tape to get everything angled correctly, get this glove box back up into place, and then this install is going to be complete. Once you are happy with your LED placement, your install will be complete. I'll show you the difference between the passenger side and the driver's side in my car. This is the passenger side. As you could see, the lights are pointed straight towards the floor, and they're quite bright, but they're fairly focused and make those circles. And now we could go over to the driver's side. And over here I put the light farther back in the footwell facing towards the driver, and it makes for a much softer effect, as you can see. They're both pretty good. I like the softer effect personally, but that side does obviously have more light. And do note that different LEDs will have different beam patterns. The ones that I have linked in the description are fairly focused, but like I said, depending on the angle and placement, you could get different effects that you want. So with all that said, that is going to wrap up this video. Please like this video if you liked it. Everything that you need to do this in your own car is linked down below, so please go through that if you're looking at doing this on your own car. Leave any questions or comments and let me know how it went on yours, and subscribe for more. I hope you stick around for the next one.